What is up, everybody? Welcome back into the RPG podcast. We appreciate you being here to watch us. And tonight, we're here to talk about tight ends and how drafting tight ends could potentially work. Different thoughts on the position, maybe going early, maybe going late, maybe streaming it in your work leagues. All right, we're here tonight to talk to you about how to not finish in last and how to hopefully win your fantasy football work league. David, appreciate you joining us again. How you doing?
Always happy to be here, Ev.
Awesome. Fantastic. Okay, so we'll just jump right in here. Work league, we are expecting the settings to be PPR. We're expecting them to be one quarterback, two running backs, two wide receivers, one tight end, two flex spots, a defense, a kicker, which every time I say those two together make me want to throw up. But needless to say, probably going to be the way it is. And then 5 bench slots. So relatively shallow benches in most work leagues. If your work league has 10, awesome, fantastic. Show off your knowledge. Make sure to have that deeper bench and enjoy it. But most are going to have 5. With that being said, David, I have it pretty clearly listed as 3 tight ends that I would consider drafting in the first 4 rounds. Are there any more that you would consider drafting in the first 4 rounds?
No, in the first 4, it's pretty clearly Brock Bowers, Trey McBride, and Hunter Henry. And of course, by Hunter Henry, I mean George Kittle.
Good. You gave me a minor heart attack. Might have skipped a couple beats here, lost a couple minutes off my life.
Real talk is Austin Hooper.
Oh, man. Back in the day, Austin Hooper, when he was putting up those top 10 fantasy seasons.
Oof. He wasn't terrible last year.
Oh, man. Okay, so Brock Bowers and Trey McBride. Fantasy Calc has them going 22-23. Man, work leagues are so unpredictable. I find it hard to believe that they're both going to get out of the second round. Which, looking at it, assuming that you have a 10-team work league, maybe you have a 12-team work league, awesome, fantastic for your work group if you can do that. But I think most are probably 10 teams, and I think they're probably going right at the end of that second round. Maybe you get lucky and they swing to the third. Do you think they're going any higher, David?
So this is one of the interesting things, because in the drafts I've personally done, which I'm basing this mostly on best ball, Brock Bowers is usually a late first, early second round pick, and McBride's at the back half of the second. At that, it's a shame because I really like Brock Bowers. He's my tight end 1, but I don't like him as much as I'm seeing him in best ball. Fantasy Calc gets their average draft position from literal hundreds of thousands of drafts. If this is where Brock Bowers is going in work leagues, maybe the casual fan hasn't realized just how good he is. I can't get enough of him at 22. I've personally never experienced it yet, but if that's what the average person that isn't obsessed with fantasy football is taking him right now, I'm smashing that button every single time he gets to me.
Yeah, I totally understand. Totally would do the same thing. I mean, if I'm sitting over here, at the very end of the second round, and I have a chance at Brock Bowers as a true difference maker, somebody that in PPR, is getting probably 150 targets once again, somebody that's going to be getting probably in that 14 plus points per game range as a tight end. You're talking about a positional difference. Let's just go down to tight end 6 last year. Tight end 6 was Mark Andrews, and that's 11 points per game. You're talking a solid 4 point per game difference out of that tight end position. I mean, look, 4 points may not sound like a lot, but
it adds up.
When you start to realize, okay, I don't need to take any brain power and think about tight end the rest of the draft. I don't need to try and play the draft board. That is a major luxury to just check a position off and move on with it. Because realistically, if you're taking one of the top 2 tight ends and or George Kittle, you're not taking another tight end. If you do, I'm sorry. Please listen to the show some more because we don't want you to take a second tight end if you're using that high of capital on it.
And if four points per game doesn't sound that much to you, just imagine like Mark Andrews, a very solid tight end last year. Imagine he had an extra 30-yard reception every single game. You'd be thrilled about that. And that's what Bowers gives you, roughly.
Yeah, and he gives you the massive target potential. You pull Brock Bowers at 153 targets last year. You pull Trey McBride at 147. And then there's still Kelsey out there at 133.
Yeah.
Kelsey is getting older. He is slowing down. So in a work league, that is a name that people could still value because he's Travis Kelsey. He still could go potentially ahead of Kittle. It wouldn't surprise me if you see that. I think that is a major mistake personally. But name cachet in work leagues does play a major role.
Yes. As it is, Kelsey's tight end 5 in ADP right now. That's too high for me. I did a whole video on why I think Kelsey's not worth that. Hopefully we can remember to put the card in because that'd be really cool as promo. But again, work leagues, everybody knows who Travis Kelsey is. He's been the best tight end in football forever. Taylor Swift's his girlfriend. There's just so much. He's probably the most well-known player in football, or at least in the top 5. So name recognition alone is going to push him up. Do not draft Travis Kelsey.
All right. Well, we heard it there. But George Kittle, currently 38 on Fantasy Calc, which would put him in the 4th round. If I can get George Kittle in the 4th round, I will happily take him in the 4th round.
Yeah, that's another great value. McBride, I like too. We should talk about him a little bit. I don't like him as much as Brock Bowers. And if Fantasy Calc's ADP is correct and they are going back to back, it's Bowers every single time for me. But McBride's another one who I think at back of the 2nd, early of the 3rd is a really good value. You can't find tight ends that are going to get 150 targets every single year. McBride's one of 3 guys you can realistically project that on. He didn't find the end zone much last year, and Kyler Murray's his quarterback, so he's never going to have a lot of touchdowns, but he's going to have more than 2 or whatever he had last year. He literally set a record for most targets to start a season without finding a touchdown. So if he has even normal touchdown luck, give him 6 or 7 next year, he's going to finish as a great tight end for you, and he was already great last year.
Yeah, very much so. With 4th round, assuming middle of 4th, we'll call it, on Kittle, is the injury risk too high for you to take him at that price?
No, generally speaking, I don't really analyze injuries. If Jimmy Garoppolo, I think is just his body wasn't built for football. George Kittle is a little more dinged up than you'd like him to be over the course of his career. But by and large, football is a physical game. Injuries happen. No one player, generally speaking, is any more prone to injury than any other. So in the 4th round, I have no problem with Kittle just because, again, tight end is a desolate wasteland. He's one of 3 tight ends that you can project a really, really high target share onto. And especially if Jennings ends up getting his trade out of San Francisco, who else are the 49ers throwing it to?
That is a great question. Yeah, great question. One that we don't really have an answer for at this point, with Brandon Ayuk being still injured, with Debo being gone, and if Jennings is getting his way, which it sounds like the 49ers are turning down most of the calls very, very quickly on him. But alas, it's training camp season, getting into training camp season, getting into smoke season. People are floating different stories out there. But if I am taking a quarterback, say Brock Bowers, Trey McBride, at the very end of the 2nd, very, very early in the 3rd, or Kittle in the mid-4th, at those assessed values, do you think you have the capital to also take a quarterback early, David?
I wouldn't. Generally speaking, quarterbacks and tight ends, you can get by with streaming them. If you have an elite option at the position, great. But you only need one, so if you need to find one midway through the season, you can do that easily enough. Running backs and wide receivers, you're going to need a lot of them. You start multiple every week. They're going to comprise most of your bench. And especially running backs, injuries happen a lot. You need to get as many as you can where you can feel comfortable about putting a guy in your flex and saying, hey, this won't sink my team. And to do that, you're going to have a really tough time when it's week 14 and you're trying to find Nyheim Hines on waivers when he signs with the Browns.
Yeah, very much so. I am in lockstep with you. It's if you're going to go quarterback early, then I don't think that you have enough capital for roster construction to be able to also go tight end early. If you go tight end early, then I don't think you also have enough draft capital and for roster construction to be able to go quarterback early. And look, with the settings we've laid out, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, 2 flex, that is 6 positions between running back and wide receiver, whereas you have 1 tight end and 1 quarterback. It's just hard from a roster construction standpoint and a war of attrition standpoint with running backs, just trying to delegate that much draft capital, that much high value draft capital to 2 singular positions. So, very much in lockstep with you on that. Now, if you are going late in the draft, say you're going round, I don't know, what would that be, 12, 10, let's say 11, 12 for your first tight end, David. All right, we're talking Evan Ingram-ish round that we both love Evan Ingram's projection potential.
Yeah.
Colson Loveland, Dalton Kincaid, Tucker Kraft. Now, if you're talking about getting, let's argue and say Loveland, Kincaid, Kraft, is there a world that you can see yourself taking a second tight end?
The board would really need to fall against me because, like I said, I'm not thrilled about any of those guys just because rookie tight ends, generally speaking, they need a year to adjust to the NFL. Brock Bowers is the exception. Kincaid and Kraft, I guess Kraft, there's some hope there, but Kincaid had a really rough year last year. I'm not too excited about what he can bring. But generally speaking, that round, I'm looking for either a wide receiver that slipped to the cracks or a running back in a convoluted backfield where, hey, maybe everyone's assuming this other guy's going to start, but this guy has a shot at winning the job, kind of doing the usual Chubba Hubbard thing, except, he's got an actual starting job this year.
Understand. Realistically, do you see a world where you would just choose to personally not take a tight end? Because I know there's leagues that I just won't take a defense or a kicker. And right before, maybe say, Friday or Saturday before the first game, I'll drop it and I'll just figure out who's on waivers to be able to pick up. Is that something that you would ever even consider?
You'll need to know the people in your league to answer that. It is an interesting question, mainly because if I do something like that, I'm usually doing it because I want to try and sell basically two nickels for a dime, which in fantasy football, the more elite players you have, the better. So I would like to double up on running backs and say, hey, I can sell you this guy drafted in the 10th and 11th for the guy you drafted in the 8th. Some leagues will go for that. Some players will go for that. But the counterpoint to that is sometimes people see your league, see you don't have a tight end, know exactly what you're doing, and refuse to accept any offer because they know you need to cut someone before week 1.
Yeah, and if they realize that, then, it's just the kind of sunk cost. But talking 10-team league, how many tight ends would you expect to be rostered within that league? I think it'd be somewhere around 13, probably
Yeah, 13,
three
14.
teams. Okay, 3 teams probably have 2, and then everybody else probably just has 1. So realistically, just going down fantasy calc, if we're trying to talk about 15 and later, we have Dallas Goedert at 15, Darren Waller at 16, which, what a story. Isaiah Likely at 17, Zach Ertz at 18, who is coming off of a great season. Kyle Pitts, the once famed prospect, at 19, Jake Ferguson at 20. So there are some decent streaming options at the tight end position if you're assuming that 13 or 14 of them are going to get drafted. So take that with a grain of salt. Don't feel like you have to pay up for those middling round tight ends. Realistically, we're talking, let's see, tight end 8 was Laporta last year at 10.9. If you go all the way down to, let's see, tight end 14 in total points. Total points 14 was Cade Otton. And Cade Otton was getting you 10 points per game. So you start thinking through all of that. I mean, you could be getting somebody that's getting you that 8 points per game, 9 points per game off of waivers. And if you're comparing that to 10, 11 that you had to spend a mid-round pick on, just think, is that worth the draft capital that you could be putting into wide receivers and running backs?
Yeah, no, there's a lot of, I won't call them good options because it's tight ends. None of them are that great except for the top three. But there are a lot of serviceable options that are going to be left on the street by the time your draft is over. So you don't feel like you need to, if you miss out on the top three, don't feel like you need to make a panic buy for TJ Hawkinson or anything like that.
Yeah, totally understand. Well, hey, we appreciate you joining us as always, David. Any final thoughts for the listeners here tonight?
Evan Ingram, go get him.
Evan Ingram, love that system. Could be a whole heck of a lot of fun. I'm going to say don't overdraft Johnny Smith because he's no longer on the Miami Dolphins. So it is a completely different offense, completely different scheme. Take that as you may. But everybody, we appreciate you joining us. Make sure to tap that like button and also press that subscribe button. We're working our way up to 1,000 subscribers. We really appreciate you guys watching this episode, and hopefully this information you found actionable, and hopefully it helps you to win your work league. All right. Have a good night, everybody.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Fantasy Football RPG Podcast. If you made it this far, be sure to like and subscribe. If you want to check out written content, head over to lastwordonsports.com.
Don't let the Goblins get you.